Welcome back. First Alert about kids and gun safety. Aisha is at the First Alert Safety Desk. New research. Parents are going to want to hear Aisha.
Emerson, the Grand Chute Fire Department this morning says to talk to your kids regularly about what they should do if they find a gun, even if you don't own firearms at home. The department posting information about a recent study saying a playroom was set up with toys and games and a disabled gun was hidden in the room. Out of 226 children ages 8 to 12, 96% discovered that firearm. What they did next differed based on whether they watched a gun safety video or a car safety video at home a week prior. 34% of the kids who watched the gun safety video told an adult about finding the gun versus 11% for the kids who watched the car safety video. 39% of kids who saw the gun safety video touched it versus 67% who saw the car video. Pulling the trigger, 9% for the kids who saw the gun safety video and 30% for those who saw the car safety video. Of course, car safety is very important too, but for this purpose, officials say to talk to your child about gun safety. More tips for parents this morning. Discuss gun use on television and movies so they learn the difference between that and real life. Also, if you do own firearms, making sure they are stored in a safe and secure location. Steve.